Another brutal shelling of Ukraine. Children have died, half the country is without power. The GUR have entered Pokrovsk right now. There is fierce street fighting going on there. In the Belgorod region, SVO heroes broke into a house, killed a local resident, and raped his wife. A response to Putin's threats. The US has begun nuclear exercises. Xi Jinping promised Trump to help rein in Putin, and immediately received a reward. Putin is losing his electorate, and the majority of Russians are against the war. A shocking opinion poll. In Donetsk, people are drinking rainwater, and dissatisfaction with the Kremlin is growing there. A massive partisan attack in Russia. Dozens of communication towers were destroyed. I can't get through on the phone, there's no internet. Hello, my name is Anastasia Dmitrovskaya. Right now about the main thing, but first, like this video and subscribe to our channel so that we don't get lost in the vastness of YouTube anymore. Over 650 drones and more than 50 missiles. On the night of October 30th, Russia launched a massive attack on Ukraine. The main targets were the western regions and cities, specifically energy facilities. The Minister of Energy confirmed that Russia once again carried out a massive missile and drone strike on Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
No windows at all.
In particular, energy facilities in Ledizhin, Bushtino, and Dobrotvir were targeted.
According to DC, Russia once again attacked thermal power plants in various regions of Ukraine. The equipment at the thermal power plants was seriously damaged. Work is underway to eliminate the consequences.
It is important to note that this is already the third massive attack on the thermal power plants of the Za Oktyabr company due to the Russian assault. Ledizhin, which is in Vinnytsia region where the thermal power plant is located, has been left without heat and water. As a result of Russian missile attacks, the Bushtinska thermal power plant suffered severe destruction. However, according to the plant's management, the station will be restored. It is also known that in the Vinnytsia region, a 7-year-old girl died after being injured by Russian shelling.
The girl was, unfortunately, according to the latest information, she has died.
Meanwhile, in temporarily occupied Luhansk, there is also an emergency power outage. Russian media report a fire, likely caused by a strike on the Luhansk thermal power plant in the city of Shastya.
The strike on the thermal power plant in the occupied city of Shastya, Luhansk region, is being reported by local social media channels. As a result, half of the region is without electricity.
In fact, against the backdrop of Russia's escalating attacks on Ukraine's energy sector, the German publication Bild writes that Ukraine faces a catastrophe this winter.
55 to 60% of Ukraine's gas infrastructure has been damaged. In just 3 days in October, Russian missiles destroyed part of the heat generation capacity. And one of Naftogaz's gas facilities was hit 6 times.
Bild also reports that the Russians have no intention of stopping their attacks, and each new destruction makes Ukraine's preparations for winter more difficult. The article quotes unnamed Ukrainian officials who warn that the coming winter will be the hardest yet. However, the article also expresses hope for continued support from Ukraine's partners during these difficult and cold times.
German Foreign Minister Johann Wadefuhl called on Western partners to support Ukraine more actively. The Reich's Minister of Economy stated that Germany will continue to fund the Ukraine Energy Support Fund. The current contribution of 390 million euros is planned to be increased by another 60 million.
But we have already survived more than one such difficult winter. I think we'll manage this time as well. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the States. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud that we have such a sensible audience. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well. Where are you watching us from? And does your country support our fight against the empire of evil? I always enjoy reading your comments, and for now, we'll keep going because the most interesting part is still ahead. Just the other day, we told you about the critical situation in the Pokrovsk direction. Yesterday, the Russians even hung their tricolor rag in the city, but it didn't stay up for long. Our guys took care of it successfully. No harm was done. Moreover, as journalist Tsiplienko wrote, GOR units were sent there due to the worsening situation. Russian military bloggers were also actively writing about the encirclement of our troops in this area. However, our military denied the encirclement, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs also reported on it.
We trust the statements of the General Staff of Ukraine. Indeed, we have many units there. They are operating around Kupiansk. As of today, I believe the situation has been stabilized. And I hope that our security and defense forces will be able to do everything to prevent Kupiansk from being captured.
The commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, also stated that the situation in the Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad agglomeration is difficult, but our troops are not encircled there.
The situation is difficult, but the claims by Russian propaganda about the alleged encirclement of Ukraine's defense forces in Pokrovsk as well as in Kupiansk do not correspond to reality.
But despite this, as the military writes, the situation remains difficult.
Heavy fighting, chaos in the city, we suffered some losses. Reinforcements have arrived, a tough night lies ahead.
However, some military personnel are making some comforting hints about the situation. Pokrovsky.
The creativity of the GUAR sometimes does not surprise but shocks. Handsome guys with big balls. Nothing to say.
Our troops hold the line and sometimes even manage to take the occupiers prisoner. And this is truly a remarkable story of capturing prisoners, because the soldiers of the 63rd Brigade stumbled upon the enemy almost by accident.
Little by little, they decided to do a mini sweep in their area to make sure they were safe. They came across a trail, so to speak. Well, I'm from Volyn. You could say I was born in the forest. No animal would trample the grass like that. They approached carefully and spotted them. Well, there was definitely a hideout there. Come on, get out here, climb out here. Hands up. Hands up, I said, come out here. He started to surrender. And
by the way, they didn't capture infantrymen, but drone operators.
They took all of his personal belongings, every single piece of equipment, and all of the valuable gear he had.
If you behave, you'll get some water soon. Let him put on his helmet filled up, just in case.
Thank you to the Defense Forces, you are all the best. Leave your words of support for them in the comments as well. More details about what's happening on the front right now are coming up in our report.
Kupiansk is surrounded, the Ukrainian armed forces are trapped in a pocket. Putin's latest loud statements turned out to be fake. Pokrovsk was under the Russian flag for no more than an hour. The defense forces destroyed the tricolor and cleared out the flag bearers.
They're busy planting flags and recording it on video. Of course, afterwards, Russian propagandists feed Russian propaganda, claiming that they are advancing rapidly and quickly, capturing some settlements.
An entire trainload of occupiers was destroyed in Zaporizhia. In Crimea, the Russians lost a missile system, 2 radars and 2 oil depots. The GUR also showed unique footage of the elimination of a Russian lieutenant colonel who commanded atrocities in Bucha. Pokrovsk under the Russian flag. This image was shown by almost all Russian media outlets. They just forgot to mention that the tricolor on the city entrance stele lasted no more than an hour. Another loud victory turned out to be just a banal PR stunt. As our military reported, the rag was discovered at 9:40, and by 10:40 it had already been destroyed.
When these small groups show up somewhere, they stick a flag in, record it on video. Of course, afterwards. Russian propagandists then feed this to Russian propaganda, claiming that they are advancing rapidly and quickly, capturing some settlements. No, this does not mean consolidation, it just means presence.
However, the situation in Pokrovsk itself remains tense, Ukrainian military note. Deep State reports that Russian forces continue to infiltrate the city, gradually increasing their infantry presence and expanding sabotage and reconnaissance activities. The main goal is to advance at any cost and disrupt Ukrainian logistics.
If we take Pokrovsk in a broad sense, the enemy operated from west to north, cutting off the logistical route to... In the south-southwest from the west, a city entered. Intense fighting is taking place from these directions. Urban. From the east, from Mirnograd, first and foremost Mirnograd, including from the east, sort of covers Pokrovsk in this overall agglomeration.
At the same time, the news about the Russian flag on the stele in Pokrovsk apparently excited Putin so much that he declared the encirclement of the Ukrainian armed forces not only in this city, but also in Kupiansk as well. The joint forces grouping denied the information, stating that the bunker dweller once again had to make a fool of himself and repeat after his own generals, a lie that not even his own audience believes.
We are conducting counter-terrorist operations in Kupiansk and accordingly delivering fire strikes in the area. And the strikes on the dam specifically allowed us to neutralize the reserves that were being brought up along the road. And in other directions as well, these are highways where there were bridges. Some of them were partially flooded or destroyed. Therefore, at the moment, the ability to bring up reserves has been weakened. And logistics have become even more complicated. And we are directly monitoring the battlefield. Of course, the complications are due to the water and the weather. Therefore, in this situation, the enemy cannot effectively deploy large reserves or act very efficiently in terms of advancing.
And by the way, about the flooding, the destruction of that very dam near Belgorod continues to yield results for the Ukrainian armed forces at the front. In the Kharkiv region, the water continues to rise and sweep away everything in its path. In particular, Russian soldiers still remain cut off from their units. But now, due to the increasing flow, the Russian command admits that it is simply impossible to establish logistics.
And those enemy units that are near the mouth of the Volchya River that flows into the Siversky Donetsk, that is, it's a tributary of the Siversky Donetsk, the Volchya River, they could end up effectively encircled because the water will flood, is already flooding, it will wash away the pontoon bridges, and it will destroy the crossing that the enemy had set up. And in this way, the Russians will find themselves trapped in a pocket. So that's what this threatens for them. And in fact, all their attempts to advance in the Vovchansk area, which we've been observing in recent weeks, there have been reports one way or another, will fail.
The Russian group is also taking hits in the rear. So, in the Zaporizhzhia region the day before, the GUR derailed an entire train of occupiers. It is reported that the train was literally packed with military cargo. As a result of the explosion, about 70 meters of railway track were destroyed. Scattered along the mangled tracks were a locomotive, 3 railway platforms, and at least 9 freight cars from the military train. Another setback awaited the Russians in Crimea. There last night, SBU drones destroyed a Panzer S-2 anti-aircraft missile system worth about $20 million. It is, by the way, one of the key components of the enemy's air defense system. The enemy also lost 2 radar stations. And after clearing the route, the cherry on top was the explosions at the oil depots in the village of Vardiske and at the Komsomolske base. Large-scale fires broke out at these facilities. Experts say the reason for all this is the continued redeployment of air defense systems from the peninsula.
The expansion of the defense system. For example, around Moscow and its surroundings, this is happening at the expense of something else, by draining resources from other sites. For now, they have been completely drained. The Far East and Siberia. Putin and his generals believe that our drones can't reach there. Well, that's still up for debate. Nevertheless, as more Russian systems are destroyed and Moscow's air defense network becomes denser, the focus keeps shifting. They won't be able to produce more air defense assets than they already can. If they concentrate them in some places, it means they're simply leaving other places exposed.
And finally, another spectacular GUR operation in Russia. Our intelligence officers reminded everyone that not a single Russian crime will go unpunished. They blew up a lieutenant colonel from the Oman unit who had overseen executions in the Kiev region during the first months of the war. The deceased, Veniamin Majerin, was eliminated in his own car on his way to work.
I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They hold the front and stand against a vast horde that greatly outnumbers them. That's why I urge everyone to support the armed forces of Ukraine. And if you can't do so financially, write them words of support in the comments. I know they're watching us. Trump instructed the Pentagon to resume nuclear weapons testing. The head of the White House wrote about this on his social media page. The
United States has more nuclear weapons than any other country. This was achieved, including a complete overhaul and refurbishment of existing weapons. During my first term in office, because of the enormous destructive power, I didn't want to do it, but I had no choice. Russia is in second place and China is a distant third, but they are catching up within 5 years. Through the testing programs of other countries, I ordered the Department of War to begin testing our nuclear weapons on a parity basis. This process will begin immediately.
Trump made his own statement about resuming nuclear weapons testing against the backdrop of Putin's test of the Burevestnik cruise missile with a nuclear power unit. Immediately after the Burevestnik test, Trump stated that the United States has nuclear submarines positioned near Russia.
In addition, this week, the Russian armed forces conducted a strategic offensive forces drill, during which both training and combat launches were successfully carried out. All three components of the Russian Federation's strategic nuclear forces were involved, as well as tests of advanced weapon prototypes.
Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov responded to the order with Trump to immediately begin nuclear tests and warned the United States that Russia would act according to the situation. At the same time, Peskov says that the test of the Burevestnik is not a nuclear one.
There really is still a current moratorium here. First. Second, President Trump in his statement mentioned that other countries are supposedly conducting nuclear weapons tests. Until now, we were not aware that anyone was conducting such tests. And if in some way the Burevestnik tests are being referred to, those are not nuclear tests in no way whatsoever. All countries are developing their defense systems, but that does not constitute a nuclear test. Therefore, the United States is a sovereign country and has the right to make sovereign decisions. But I want to remind you of President Putin's statement, which has been repeated many times, that, of course, if someone withdraws from the moratorium, then Russia will act accordingly in that situation. President Putin has already stated this repeatedly.
And tell me, gentlemen, why am I not surprised? As we can see, everything in the Kremlin is stably unstable.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
China will cooperate with the United States on the issue of Russia's war against Ukraine. Trump stated this in a conversation with journalists. He said that during his meeting with Xi Jinping, they discussed the issues of the war in Ukraine very seriously.
We agree that both sides are bogged down in fighting, and sometimes you have to let them fight. But Xi is going to help us, and we will work together on the issue of Ukraine. There's nothing more we can do.
Do you think Trump is determined when it comes to peace in Ukraine? And in your opinion, will China, regarding peace in Ukraine itself, support the American president? And also about the results of this meeting. The US will lower tariffs for China from 20% to 10%. Trump announced this following talks with Xi Jinping in South Korea.
As you know, I imposed a 20% tariff on goods from China because of fentanyl imports into the US. That's a high tariff. I reduced it to 10% based on his statements today. So now the new tariff takes effect immediately.
In addition, Trump called the meeting very good and rated it a 12 out of 10.
Well, overall, if you rate it on a scale from 1 to 10, the meeting was a 12. It was definitely special and very important, and I think everything went really well.
Meanwhile, Xi Jinping confirmed that, quote, the economic and trade teams of the countries have reached a consensus. And he noted that China and the US should cooperate on the international and regional stage. It's hard to believe, but 2/3 of Russians are tired of the war in Ukraine. But this is reported by the publication, citing a poll commissioned for the presidential administration. That's how it is.
Our editorial team has reviewed a presentation prepared by the Kremlin for regional headquarters ahead of the elections, for the 2026 State Duma elections. The document, among other things, contains a fresh analysis, Russians' attitudes toward the war against Ukraine.
According to the survey data, which has not been published anywhere before, 56% of Russians said they are very tired of the special military operation. Another 27% partially agreed with this statement. It is also known that by the elections, United Russia plans to almost double its rating from the current 33% to 60%. What do you think? How much do these survey results reflect reality? In the Belgorod region, several Russian soldiers broke into a house, killed a local resident, and raped his wife. This was reported by the publication Pepel.
According to Pepel, last night servicemen broke into a house on Volchanskaya Street and killed the homeowner, Sergei S., who at that moment was sleeping with his wife. After that, the soldiers raped his wife. According to local residents, the serviceman who killed Sergei was detained by the military police in
The regional office of the investigative committee reported that Russian armed forces private Alexei Kostrykin was detained for murder and rape.
Pepel emphasizes that Kostrykin did not act alone. The rape was committed by a group. Several soldiers also participated in the murder. The other participants in the crimes have not been detained. According to the Belgorod media outlet Fonar, the victim was a 56-year-old employee of the major Shebekino-based company Sergei. The editor-in-chief of Pepel, Nikita Parminov, notes that Sergei's wife, who was raped, works as a schoolteacher.
The water situation in Donetsk has remained critical for the second year in a row.
When there is no water in the DPR, we collect water in the rain. This is how it works in simple terms.
Local residents are literally dependent on the weather, because rain is simply an opportunity to make at least a minimal supply of water. We
just didn't get any water at all. It just hasn't been coming for a month and a half. I don't know, it's just literally unbearable. I don't know, I honestly don't know what to do without water anymore. It's impossible. It's impossible to live without water. It's not coming at all, not even a drop. Not here, not outside, not at home, not outside, not in the basement, nowhere. We simply can't collect any water. Seriously, in the 21st century.
Despite the fact that this water situation has been going on in the city for several years, videos still go viral online from time to time showing people stealing water from each other, getting into fights, and forming long lines for drinking water that stretch into midnight, and sometimes people even scoop water from puddles.
Another batch of water has arrived. Thank God we finally got it. The rush was just enormous. No, let's make sure there's enough for everyone. Just one. No, 2 each. There wasn't enough for 2 each. Maybe there wasn't enough? Well, sorry, that's just how it turned out. We agreed, you see, for 16 minutes.
It's important to note that before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, there were no water problems in Donetsk. And the cause of the crisis was the destruction of the infrastructure by the very same people. By the Russians, who are now actively trying to shift responsibility for this destruction onto Ukraine. Attention, partisans are at work. According to Ukraine's main intelligence directorate, cell towers and communication equipment of local mobile operators continue to catch fire all across Russia. In recent months, fires have been recorded in particular in the Republic of Adygea, in the Rostov region, in Kamchatka Krai, as well as in the territories of Ukraine temporarily occupied by the Kremlin. Industry is on its last legs. 80% of Russia's sectors are slipping into decline. Russian industry is rapidly losing momentum, and the consequences of the war amid exhaustion are finishing off the country's economy. The Security Council has predicted that Russia will face its worst economic downturn since the 1990s if sanctions are tightened and oil prices drop to $35.
Resources are on the verge of exhaustion. Claims about the stability of the Russian economy do not stand up to the facts.
There's really no other way to describe it, simply put. Well, this isn't our choice. We don't want things to develop this way.
Putin is trying to bluff and save face by creating an illusion of success. But it's all in vain. Russia's economy is rapidly going downhill. Almost 80% of the country's industry has fallen into recession.
When we talk about individual sectors, it means that production in these sectors compared to the same period, usually the previous year, is getting worse. In other words, things aren't improving, they're getting worse. And recession is exactly that worsening, when you're in the negative. When a recession becomes prolonged, that is not just 1 year, but say 3 or 4 years of decline, then it's no longer a recession, it's a depression.
Finally, since September, the overall growth of industrial production in Russia has slowed to 0.3% year-on-year. That's almost 19 times less than last year.
There simply aren't enough people available to handle the workload, and there just isn't enough money or financial resources to pay for the delivery and transportation of all the necessary components for the purchase of the goods you need for processing. As a result, you end up producing less. And when you produce less, there you have it, a recession, a negative compared to the previous period.
The sharpest decline is seen in those civilian industries that were supposed to replace the products of foreign companies that left Russia after the start of the full-scale war.
the collapse of import substitution. There were plans to replace everything, but in order to replace everything, you have to produce what you intend to use as a substitute. And if you don't produce anything, then what are you going to use for substitution? How are you going to carry out this import substitution when you aren't making anything yourself? So of course, any economic downturn, it means that goods are not being produced, and if they're not being produced, then there's no point in keeping the people who make them. And that leads to unemployment, and unemployment is always an unpleasant situation.
In fact, the domestic market is deprived of consumer goods and Russian factories are unable to make up for the shortage.
Even, it would seem, the military sector, part of the military sector is the production of weapons and ammunition. In September of this year, in September of last year, Russia saw a decrease of 1.3%. So even the production of weapons and ammunition is already in decline. What can we say about the rest of the economy, which is showing even worse results?
The central bank has predicted that Russia will experience its worst economic decline since the 1990s if sanctions are tightened. If the situation does not improve, by 2026 the Kremlin could lose $108 billion in export revenues.
Here the problems are, let's say, still gaining momentum, but as for their implementation, here's the first thing we see. Taxes in Russia have been rising since the beginning of the year. The identification fee will be introduced on December 1st. The environmental tax is set to increase almost tenfold starting November 1st, literally in a week or even just a couple of days. So it turns out that all these various economic problems are cropping up more and more often, and they keep appearing in the news. Because, you know, it's a zugzwang situation when you don't have any good options.
Russian Sberbank following Gazprom has begun mass layoffs. In the first quarter, the staff of the largest bank, which holds half of all individual deposits, decreased by 8,600 employees, in the second quarter by 3,500, and in the third by 1,500.
From Sberbank of Russia, when they see, here's a direct quote from Sberbank's head, Herman Greff, throughout 2025 there is not a single new investment project that Sberbank is working on. That is, the people responsible for this area simply have nothing to do, and since they have nothing to do, well, I mean, there's no point in paying them a salary, so they're being laid off. So the layoffs are a demonstration that there is no demand for the economic functions that Sberbank provides. And accordingly, these people are being cut, but this is just one of many examples.
That's the reality, only Putin is trying to hide it all. But there's nowhere left to hide. The economy is cracking, the country is losing money.
Ukraine's partners have started actively helping us improve our air defense system and protect Ukrainian skies from the barbaric shelling by Russians from Britain and Germany. New weapons are already on their way. Details in our report.
Russia is ramping up its strikes on the Ukrainian energy system and is changing its attack tactics. Moscow is launching hundreds of drones capable of bypassing the air defense system and equipped with cameras for improved targeting.
Russia has turned its strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure into a systematic operation aimed not just at temporarily damaging the networks, but at destroying the viability of large areas of the country. On the eve of winter, the goal of the attacks is to deprive regions of heat and electricity, undermine industry, provoke mass immigration, and create political pressure on Kyiv, writes The Economist.
In these circumstances, air defense becomes critically important. But this year, Western partners are acting proactively, strengthening Ukraine's skies and energy system before the cold sets in.
We are not just now starting to prepare for this winter period, but we began preparations back at the end of the previous winter season.
As early as November, the UK will begin serial production of Ukrainian Octopus air defense drones, a joint project between Kyiv and London, designed for the rapid protection of the skies from enemy drones and missiles.
Our Ukrainian friends will share their technologies and intellectual property with the UK, and in turn, we will further develop them and produce them on a large scale so that we can deliver to Ukraine every month. Thousands of interceptor drones, said El Carnes, the UK's Minister for the Armed Forces, in Parliament.
These drones will become part of a system called the Air Shield. It will combine Western air defense systems such as Patriot, Airstream, NASAMS, as well as new mobile units, which Germany and other allies are providing to Ukraine before the start of winter. The first drones will be tested by Ukrainian military personnel. If the tests are successful, production will be expanded, and some of the drones will likely be manufactured directly in Ukraine. At the same time, the UK authorities are expanding their multi-purpose missile production program. It is planned to supply Ukraine with 5,000 units of this weapon to strengthen air defense. We
are also announcing an increase in the production program in the UK to provide Ukraine with 5,000 new multi-purpose missiles. This will create new jobs in Belfast and other cities, as well as strengthen Ukraine's air defense for the coming winter.
At the same time, European allies are increasing their support for Ukraine's energy sector. Germany and other NATO countries are mobilizing resources from air defense missiles to support for the energy sector so that Ukraine can withstand the winter and resist attacks on critical infrastructure.
Germany has already paid 390 million euros, with another 30 million to come. We agreed on this in the summer, but today I want to announce that we will invest an additional 30 million. Thus, we are providing 450 million euros. This money will make it possible to acquire the necessary technical equipment to save Ukraine.
In addition, EU countries are preparing a winter support package. To the 3 billion euros already provided, a new guarantee of 800 million has been added for the emergency purchase of gas. This was reported by the EU ambassador to Ukraine, Katarina Maternova. The aid covers repairs to power grids as well as the supply of generators and transformers.
We have also provided and continue to provide a lot of assistance in the energy sector, not only generators for people and businesses, but also transformer and compressor stations to help restore power grids, gas distribution networks, and compressors that supply gas from storage facilities that have been distributed. We also provide financial support to state-owned enterprises and major energy companies for the repair of their equipment. We also supply more than 2 gigawatts of electricity per day.
Thus, support for Ukraine this winter is reaching a new level, from modern air defense systems to reliable energy supply. And whatever the Kremlin may be planning, Ukraine together with its allies is aiming not just for tactical success but for strategic success to withstand the cold, to preserve its strength and to maintain its ability to defend itself.
The United States is reducing its military presence in Eastern Europe. This was reported by Reuters.
Adjustments to the deployment of US forces are not unusual. A NATO representative stated, adding that even with these adjustments, the number of American troops in Europe remains higher than it has been for many years.
It is known that about 700 American soldiers will be withdrawn from the region, including those stationed in Romania, Poland, and Germany. The US will also leave the airbase Mikhail Kiglanichanov on the shore of the Black Sea, where they arrived 2 years ago to deter the Kremlin. How do you like our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, give this video a like to support what we do. And be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our next episodes. See you!